The scent of precise calibration filled Eleanor Vance's small kitchen at precisely 5:45 a.m. It was the rich, almost earthy aroma of coffee beans, freshly ground to a perfect medium-fine consistency. Her hands, calloused faintly from years of holding cold metal and rough paper, moved with an almost surgical precision, pouring the dark, fragrant grounds into the filter, the quiet hiss of the coffee maker, the only sound disrupting the pre-dawn stillness. The rest of the world outside her third-floor apartment in the older brick-lined part of the city was still largely asleep, a symphony of muffled, distant sirens and the occasional roar of a garbage truck. But within her walls, a meticulous order reigned. Her breakfast was a solitary affair, consumed at a small, unvarnished wooden table. A single, perfectly poached egg, a slice of whole wheat toast, unsalted, unbuttered, and a glass of water, precisely halfway full. Her cutlery, a fork, a knife, a spoon, lay aligned with obsessive precision, each handle parallel, each tined or bladed edge facing the same direction. It wasn't about austerity for Eleanor. It was about control, about finding a quiet, predictable rhythm in a world that often spun wildly out of it. The hum of the old refrigerator was a constant companion, a low, reassuring drone in a life largely devoid of conversational warmth. She preferred the company of her books, rows upon rows of them, lining every available wall space in her living room. Criminology textbooks nestled beside dusty tomes on forensic psychology, case studies on serial killers next to philosophical treatises on the nature of evil. Each spine was a portal to a different kind of chaos, a different manifestation of the human psyche, and Eleanor devoured them all, seeking patterns, seeking understanding. Her mind, a labyrinth of cross-referenced facts and intuitive leaps, craved the undeniable logic of truth, yet her personal life was a testament to the solitude that often accompanies such a singular pursuit. The detachment in her apartment bled into the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of the precinct. Detective Eleanor Vance was a known quantity, a formidable mind, respected but rarely approached. Her office, a neat square of utilitarian efficiency, mirrored her home. Files were stacked not haphazardly, but according to case number, date, and a personal color-coded system only she understood. The faint scent of stale coffee and printer ink permeated the air, a familiar backdrop to the quiet intensity that emanated from her. This particular morning, the usual hum of pre-shift chatter was punctuated by a frustrated groan from across the bullpen. It was Detective Marcus Miller, a rookie with earnest eyes and a perpetually worried frown, hunched over a cold case file that seemed twice his size. Miller was bright, enthusiastic, but lacked the seasoned eye for the minute details, the subtle dissonances that Eleanor could pluck from a mountain of evidence. The case, a missing persons report from a decade ago, had clearly overwhelmed him. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, muttering to himself. "This is impossible." Miller sighed, loud enough for Eleanor to hear, though he wasn't addressing her directly. "Another dead end. Just dust and shadows. How do you even begin with these cold ones?" Eleanor paused, her own coffee mug halfway to her lips. She could have ignored him. Many of the veteran detectives would have, letting the rookie flounder, a necessary baptism by fire. But she remembered her own early struggles, the overwhelming feeling of a case file mocking her in its impenetrable silence. There was a flicker of something in Miller's eyes, a genuine desire to understand, not just to solve. It was a reflection of the idealism that still, stubbornly, resided within her own core, despite the cynicism that the job often bred. Without a word, Eleanor pushed her chair back, the industrial wheels whispering against the linoleum. She walked to a filing cabinet, her movements economical, precise. Her fingers danced over the tabs, pulling out an old, yellowed file, marked with a red closed sticker. It was the Blackwood case, a disappearance from 15 years prior that had baffled the department for years before she, in a nascent stage of her career, had cracked it. She placed the file gently on Miller's desk, pushing it just close enough for him to see, but not so close as to imply she was taking over. Miller looked up, startled, his brow furrowed in confusion. Detective Vance, Eleanor didn't meet his gaze directly. Instead, her eyes scanned the open file on his desk, then drifted to the Blackwood case. "The key isn't always in what's there, Miller," she began, her voice a low, steady murmur, surprisingly soft for someone so often perceived as rigid. "It's in what isn't, or in the details everyone dismisses as irrelevant." She opened the Blackwood file to a specific page, pointing with a long, slender finger to a single, almost imperceptible detail in an old police photograph, a small, chipped ceramic bird figurine on a windowsill, half hidden by a curtain. Everyone focused on the forced entry, the ransacked house. They missed this. The victim collected antique birds. This one was a cheap knockoff, placed deliberately in a spot it didn't belong. It was a message, a silent scream. Miller leaned closer, his eyes widening as he saw the minute detail. "A message! But how did you know?" Eleanor's gaze hardened slightly, a deep analytical light entering her eyes. Psychological profiling. The perpetrator was meticulous, almost artistic in his cruelty. He wanted to leave his mark, a signature that only he would recognize, a way to play with the investigators. The victim, unknowingly, left a counter-message, a plea. That figurine was a code, a subtle defiance to his calculated chaos. It led us to a storage locker, and from there, to the truth. She explained the psychological profile behind that detail, how the perpetrator's need for control manifested in specific, seemingly minor acts, how the victim's own resilience, even in terror, could leave a breadcrumb trail. She didn't elaborate on her own hours of silent, almost meditative study of the case, the nights spent poring over every minute detail until the pattern emerged like a constellation in a dark sky. She simply guided him, offering the insight without seeking the spotlight. Miller looked from the old file to his own, a new spark of understanding in his eyes. "So, I need to look for the cracks, the things that don't fit." "Precisely," Eleanor affirmed, a rare, almost imperceptible nod. "The human element is never truly linear. Miller, even in chaos, there are patterns. Find the pattern. Find the person." She closed the Blackwood file, the soft thud a punctuation mark. She had given him a tool, a new lens through which to view the daunting task. Her satisfaction was private, a quiet triumph in helping another pursue the justice she so fiercely believed in. She had no need for accolades. The pursuit of truth was its own reward. As Miller turned back to his file with renewed vigor, Eleanor returned to her desk. Her gaze, for a fleeting moment, drifted to her own corkboard, a small, personal space amidst the departmental memoranda. Tacked to it, half obscured by a new case brief she was about to pin, was an old, faded photograph. It was a picture of a young girl, no older than 10, with a wide, innocent smile and eyes that, even in the grainy black and white, held a haunting familiarity. Not just any familiarity, but a specific, chilling resemblance to a dream that had plagued her for years, a dream of a desolate field and a whisper in the wind, a child's plea. A subtle tremor passed through Eleanor. Her hand, holding the new case brief, paused in midair. For a brief, involuntary second, her precise movements faltered. A fleeting, pained expression, quickly masked, crossed her face. It was gone almost as soon as it appeared, but it was there. A deep-seated anguish that spoke of a wound that had never fully healed. She quickly, almost vehemently, pinned the new case brief directly over the photograph, obscuring it completely. The action was more than just covering a picture. It was a desperate attempt to push back a tide of memory, a past unresolved case, perhaps a case from her early career. perhaps even a personal loss that still haunted her quiet moments. This small, almost violent gesture, and the lingering shadow in her eyes, hinted at a deeper intuition, a buried personal connection to the very nature of disappearance, a raw nerve that the profession constantly threatened to expose. The quiet before the storm was her own, but the storm was coming, and this time, it threatened to unearth not just the city's secrets, but her own. The faint aroma of stale coffee and printer ink that clung to Eleanor's office seemed to thicken the morning she found the new file on her desk. Its stark white cover, stamped with the red urgency of missing person, felt heavier than usual, almost radiating the unspoken anxieties of those left behind. Her personal rhythm, a carefully constructed fortress against chaos, braced for the inevitable intrusion. The case summary, concise and dispassionate, introduced Laura Thorne, a 32-year-old suburban wife, seemingly unremarkable, living a life of quiet perfection in a meticulously manicured cul-de-sac. The initial police report was routine: a distraught husband, an empty house, no signs of forced entry. A standard, unsettling, but common disappearance. But as Eleanor's gaze, sharp and unblinking, scanned the accompanying evidence log, a specific detail snagged her attention, pulling her from the detached professionalism she usually maintained. Item number 4. Small, discarded silver locket, found near rear patio door, engraved with unusual symbol. A low-resolution photograph accompanied the entry, a delicate locket, its surface tarnished, bearing a symbol that seemed to writhe and coil, a stylized serpent devouring its own tail, the ancient Ouroboros, but with an added, almost imperceptible, jagged line slicing through its form. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, pierced Eleanor. Her coffee mug, still warm in her hands, trembled. The symbol, it was impossible. Yet, there it was, hauntingly familiar. Not just from a textbook or an obscure mythological reference, it mirrored, with chilling precision, a detail from a recurring, unsettling dream that had plagued her for years. A dream of an endless, desolate field under a bruised sky, a whisper in the wind, and always, somewhere in the periphery, that symbol, shimmering with a malevolent light. More disturbingly, it also bore an uncanny resemblance to a minor, almost dismissed detail, found in the periphery of a deeply disturbing cold case from early in her career. A case involving a child's disappearance. A case that still gnawed at the edges of her consciousness, leaving an ache she couldn't quite name. This detail, insignificant to any other officer, resonated with a raw, deep-seated intuition within Eleanor, stirring the depths of a past trauma she had tried so desperately to bury. Eleanor initially felt a familiar pull, a magnetic force drawing her back into the labyrinthine darkness of unsolved mysteries. It was a place she knew intimately, a landscape that often mirrored her own internal struggles with hidden truths and unspoken grief. Her first instinct was to push the file away, to delegate it to Miller or another eager detective. The emotional toll of these cases, the way they burrowed into her mind and gnawed at her peace, was a burden she often found unbearable. Her personal life, already sparse, became even more constricted during these intense investigations, leaving her feeling utterly exposed and vulnerable. She considered claiming a heavy workload, wanting to avoid the emotional maelstrom that solving these cases inevitably brought. Yet, the locket's symbol pulsed in her mind, an inexplicable feeling of recognition sparking a flicker of her old, relentless drive. It was a battle between the desire for the quiet, predictable rhythm she craved, and the unyielding call of justice that had defined her existence. She closed her eyes for a moment, and a vivid flashback, unbidden and sharp, pierced her composure. She was back in the cluttered, dust-filled attic of the old farmhouse during that haunting cold case from years ago. The air was thick with the scent of decay and fear. She saw the peeling wallpaper, the single broken doll on the floor, and then, her eyes fixated on a faint, almost invisible etching on a wooden beam the same symbol, crude and scratched, but undeniably the same. The memory slammed into her, bringing with it the cold knot of failure she had felt when that case had gone unsolved. It reinforced her internal conflict to pursue this path. Again meant confronting not just Laura Thorne's potential fate, but the specter of her own past, her own limitations. But it also meant a chance to finally understand, to gain some measure of control over the chaos that had once consumed her. She opened her eyes, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just another case. This was a call to arms, a direct challenge from the shadows of her own history. The locket had acted as a trigger, pulling her into a current she could no longer resist. During her preliminary investigation, Eleanor made the short drive to the Thorne residence. The house was a picture of suburban bliss. 2 stories, manicured lawn, a faint scent of petunias in the warm afternoon air. Elias Thorne, Laura's husband, met her at the door, his face a mask of carefully constructed grief. He was impeccably dressed, his hair slightly disheveled in a way that suggested distress without losing control. He offered her coffee, spoke in measured tones, and provided a detailed, seemingly airtight alibi for the night Laura disappeared a business trip, confirmed by flight manifests and hotel receipts. He played the role of the distraught husband perfectly, almost too perfectly. But Eleanor's eyes, trained to see beyond the superficial, detected the subtle inconsistencies. A flicker of an emotion in Elias's eyes when he spoke of Laura's eccentricities, not sadness, but something akin to annoyance, quickly masked. A strange turn of phrase when he described Laura's favorite book as something about old myths, a subtle dismissiveness that felt out of place for a devoted husband. Most damningly, as he talked, his left hand idly tapped a rhythm on the armrest of his chair, a rhythm that, to Eleanor's acute ear, subtly mimicked a Morse code sequence she knew from an old police training manual, spelling out a single, chilling word, done. It was barely perceptible, a subconscious tick perhaps, but it sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. Later, sifting through Laura's discarded personal effects in the sterile environment of the evidence locker, a box filled with notebooks, a worn purse, an old tablet, Eleanor found another, even more chilling clue. Tucked deep inside Laura's seemingly innocuous personal planner, under a list of grocery items, was a sequence of seemingly random numbers and letters. It looked like a jumbled mess. But to Eleanor, whose mind instinctively sought patterns, it felt too deliberate. Her fingers, quick and nimble, transcribed the sequence into a decryption app on her secure police tablet. The app, a specialized tool she had developed years ago for complex encryption, whirred for a moment. Then, a single, brief message appeared on the screen, stark and terrifying. "He knows. The door. Don't trust." The message was clearly meant to be found, a desperate plea for help or a warning, hidden in plain sight. It wasn't the kind of note a person contemplating a voluntary departure would leave. This was a message from someone in peril, someone who knew they were being watched. And the chilling implication of "he knows" combined with Elias's subtly disturbing behavior solidified Eleanor's conviction. This revelation, personal and chilling in its implications, made it utterly impossible for Eleanor to walk away from the case. The locket, the dream, the subtle cues from Elias, and now this encoded message they wove together into an inescapable web. This was not a simple disappearance. It was something far more sinister, far more complex. She knew, with a cold certainty that settled deep in her bones, that Laura Thorne had not vanished willingly. She had been taken, or silenced. And Eleanor, Detective Eleanor Vance, the woman who sought order in chaos, the woman who carried her own buried pains, would not rest until she uncovered the truth, no matter the personal cost. The point of no return had been crossed. The stark message, "He knows, at the door, don't trust," had not merely solidified Eleanor's conviction. It had become a burning fuse, igniting an urgency that pushed her investigative methods beyond the conventional. The scent of fear, almost palpable, emanated from Laura Thorne's discarded planner, mingling with the sterile odor of the evidence locker. Eleanor knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that Elias Thorne was not merely a grieving husband. He was a cagey predator, and Laura Thorne was his silent prey, or worse, his victim. The police department's usual protocols, designed for straightforward cases, felt like blunt instruments against the subtle deception she sensed. Driven by the coded message and her now sharpened intuition, Eleanor began to delve into Laura Thorne's digital footprint with an almost obsessive focus. She wasn't looking for broad strokes, but for the infinitesimal tremors in the digital ether. Laura's social media, initially appearing bland and unrevealing, became a canvas for Eleanor's psychological profiling skills. She wasn't sifting through vacation photos or mundane updates. She was looking for patterns in the comments Laura left on obscure blogs, the subtle shifts in her online posting habits, the peculiar choice of emojis. She noticed, for instance, a disproportionate number of likes on posts related to historical preservation and forgotten archives, a stark contrast to her otherwise superficial online persona. These were details other detectives would dismiss as mundane, irrelevant background noise. But to Eleanor, they were whispers in the dark, leading her to hidden online communities dedicated to esoteric symbols and ancient lore, the very symbol on the locket resurfacing in unexpected corners of the internet. Within these obscure forums, Eleanor found Laura's true voice, a series of encrypted private messages, disguised as discussions about art or history, that revealed a pattern of subtle manipulation and growing fear in Laura's last days. Laura had been reaching out, seeking help, using veiled language to describe her increasing isolation and the suffocating control of someone she referred to only as the architect. This wasn't about showing off Eleanor's talents. It was her only way to piece together the fragmented truth, to give voice to the voiceless. Her quiet observation skills, honed by years of studying human behavior, allowed her to see the panic in Laura's coded pleas, the desperation hidden beneath layers of digital obfuscation. The deeper she dug, the more Laura's seemingly perfect suburban life unraveled, revealing a carefully constructed facade designed to conceal a terrifying reality. Detective Marcus Miller, still the earnest rookie, continued to shadow Eleanor on the case, observing her with a growing mix of awe and bewilderment. He watched as Eleanor spent hours poring over seemingly insignificant digital timestamps, cross-referencing IP addresses with old real estate records, and even analyzing the frequency of Laura's online purchases for unusual patterns. He saw her connect disparate pieces of digital evidence, a deleted email fragment here, a forgotten forum post there, with a unique insight into human behavior that was both unsettling and brilliant. He'd seen veteran detectives work, but never with this level of almost supernatural intuition, this ability to pluck meaning from the mundane. Miller had initially believed the digital trail was a dead end, but Eleanor was treating it like a living, breathing entity, coaxing its secrets out one bite at a time. He was impressed, his initial skepticism giving way to a profound admiration for her unorthodox, yet undeniably effective approach. Simultaneously, Captain Thomas Sterling, Eleanor's superior, a man built from the rigid backbone of conventional police procedure and a firm believer in tangible evidence, watched Eleanor's unconventional approach with growing skepticism and open disapproval. Sterling was a career officer, by the book to a fault, who valued efficiency reports and quick resolutions above all else. He saw Eleanor's deep dive into online forums and obscure psychological profiles as fringe, a waste of valuable departmental resources. He'd seen too many detectives get lost in what he called the rabbit hole of theories when they should be focusing on leads, interviews, and physical evidence. His office door, often left ajar to project an air of accessibility, would frequently slam shut after a particularly terse phone call regarding Eleanor's methods. "Vance is chasing ghosts again," Sterling would grumble to his lieutenants, often within earshot of others. obsessing over some online diary when we should be interviewing more witnesses. This isn't a psychology lecture. It's a missing persons case. He publicly questioned her methods in daily briefings, his voice laced with thinly veiled exasperation. Detective Vance, any actual progress? Or are we still decoding poetic verse? His tone was dismissive, designed to undermine her authority and her approach, driven by his desire for a quick resolution and a fear of departmental scrutiny, for a prolonged, stalled investigation. He saw Eleanor's methods not as innovative, but as a liability that could reflect poorly on his leadership. Meanwhile, Elias Thorne, cunning and calculating, sensed Eleanor's growing proximity to the truth. His carefully constructed facade of grief, while convincing to most, was cracking under Eleanor's relentless scrutiny. He wasn't aware of the specifics of her digital investigation, but he felt the shift in the police's questions, the subtle probing that indicated they were looking beyond the obvious. His paranoia, a constant undercurrent to his calm demeanor, spiked. He needed to throw them off the scent, to redirect their focus. He executed a subtle but calculated move to mislead the investigation. Days after Eleanor began her digital deep dive, Elias discovered a meticulously fabricated suicide note among Laura's belongings. The note, seemingly written in Laura's handwriting, spoke of overwhelming personal burdens and a desire to disappear from it all. It was a masterpiece of deception, filled with just enough personal detail to be believable, yet vague enough to avoid immediate contradiction. He subtly highlighted a fabricated alibi from a sympathetic, easily manipulated relative, Laura's elderly, confused aunt, who confirmed Laura had called her the night she disappeared, sounding distraught and speaking of leaving everything behind. Elias provided a timeline, carefully corroborated by falsified call logs he later produced from an burner phone, subtly redirecting the police's focus away from himself and towards the narrative of a voluntary, tragic disappearance. Captain Sterling, eager for a quick resolution, latched onto the suicide note and the aunt's testimony, seeing it as definitive proof that Eleanor's fringe theories were baseless. "See, Vance," he'd snapped, triumphantly waving the note. Plain and simple. She walked out, case closed for all intents and purposes. He instructed other detectives to prioritize checking bus stations and remote cabins, further diffusing their resources. He believed he had cornered Eleanor, validating his own rigid approach. But Elias Thorne's true manipulative nature was laid bare to Eleanor, a dark canvas upon which he painted his lies. He didn't know that Eleanor, with her sharpened intuition and her ability to see the shadows within the light, was already far ahead, tracing the intricate web of deceit he had so meticulously woven. The path forward was treacherous, but Eleanor knew she was on the right track, even if she had to walk it alone. Eleanor Vance's meticulous digital excavation of Laura Thorne's life had unearthed a faint, almost imperceptible trail, a whisper in the vast digital wilderness. The encrypted messages, the peculiar online communities, and the chilling reference to the architect had led her to a name buried deep within Laura's old email archives: Dr. Eris Thorne, Laura's estranged brother, a reclusive but brilliant tech expert, known for his groundbreaking, albeit controversial, work in decentralized network security. Eris lived an almost hermetic existence in a dilapidated, isolated family home on the outskirts of the city. The address, a long-forgotten family secret, resonated with a deeper, more unsettling truth. It was the very house where Laura and Elias Thorne had spent their childhood, a place where the roots of their tangled family history were deeply, perhaps irrevocably, buried. This decaying, isolated structure, a shadow of its former self, became the symbolic arena for Eleanor's ultimate test, a physical manifestation of the decaying family ties and the hidden truths that bound Laura's disappearance to a deeper, darker conspiracy involving Elias's criminal enterprise. The moment Eleanor stepped onto the gravel driveway of the Thorne family home, a chill, unrelated to the crisp autumn air, seeped into her bones. The house loomed, a relic of faded grandeur, its windows like vacant eyes staring out from behind a veil of overgrown ivy. She knocked on the heavy oak door, the sound echoing hollowly. Dr. Eris Thorne, when he finally answered, was a gaunt, anxious man in his late 30s, with a perpetually furrowed brow and eyes that darted nervously. He was a stark contrast to his impeccably groomed brother, Elias. Eris was initially cautious, distrustful of the police due to past family betrayals, a bitter legal dispute over an inheritance that Elias had ruthlessly manipulated, leaving Eris alienated and deeply resentful. He answered Eleanor's questions evasively, his words laced with a deep-seated suspicion, his silence often speaking louder than his hesitant answers. He knew more than he let on, Eleanor sensed, but the fear of his brother, a fear rooted in years of psychological manipulation and quiet threats, held him captive. Eleanor found herself increasingly isolated within her own department. Captain Sterling, his patience worn thin by what he deemed Eleanor's unproductive theories and lack of a conventional breakthrough, actively obstructed her. He denied her requests for additional manpower, rerouted her surveillance requests to other units, and subtly pressured her to wrap up the case as a voluntary disappearance, citing the fabricated suicide note and the aunt's testimony as definitive proof. He saw Eleanor's tenacity not as dedication, but as insubordination, a personal challenge to his authority. "Vance, I need results, not riddles," he'd bark during their tense morning check-ins, his voice tight with barely contained irritation. "The public wants closure. The brass wants closure. We don't have infinite resources for your intuition." Elias Thorne, cunning and perpetually one step ahead, sensed Eleanor's progress through subtle shifts in the public narrative and discreet inquiries from his police contacts, a network he had cultivated over years of quiet corruption. He escalated his attempts to mislead, using his connections to spread misinformation through local media, hinting at Laura's alleged mental instability and her history of erratic behavior, portraying her as a tragic figure who had chosen to vanish. He even orchestrated anonymous threats, subtle but chilling, delivered via untraceable digital channels to Eleanor's personal devices, warning her to let sleeping dogs lie. These were not direct, physical threats, but insidious psychological pressures, designed to wear her down, to make her question her own sanity. Eleanor had to proceed virtually alone, navigating a treacherous landscape of deceit and obstruction, relying solely on her razor-sharp intuition, her meticulousness, and the faint hope that Eris would eventually overcome his fear and fully trust her with the truth. The pressure mounted, both from within the department and from the sinister machinations of Elias. Then, a critical deadline emerged, a final, chilling piece of the puzzle. Through Laura's hidden digital trails, Eleanor uncovered evidence of Elias's larger criminal operation, a vast and complex network of illicit financial transactions disguised as legitimate tech investments. Laura, she realized, had stumbled upon this scheme, perhaps even helped build the initial, innocuous framework of it before discovering its true, sinister purpose. Eleanor's decryption of a final, fragmented data burst from Laura's private server revealed a coded message about a massive, synchronized money laundering operation, set to culminate in a matter of days, a final transfer that would make Elias Thorne untouchable, effectively legitimizing billions in ill-gotten gains. This implied that Laura's disappearance was directly linked to preventing her from exposing this larger crime. Elias hadn't just silenced her. He had effectively kidnapped her to ensure his operation went through unimpeded. Eleanor realized, with a sickening lurch in her stomach, that she had limited time, perhaps only 72 hours, to uncover the full truth and find Laura, or evidence of what had happened to her, before Elias completed his final, irreparable move, before his digital empire became impenetrable, and before more innocent lives were potentially endangered by his vast criminal enterprise. The last door, the symbolic gateway to the ultimate truth, was looming, but its precise location, the final piece of the puzzle, remained tantalizingly out of reach. The web of lies was tightening, and Eleanor was trapped within it, fighting to cut herself free before time ran out. The 72-hour deadline loomed like a guillotine, each ticking second echoing in Eleanor Vance's ears. The final transfer of Elias Thorne's illicit billions was imminent, a digital vanishing act that would make him untouchable. Eleanor, with the reluctant, fear-tinged assistance of Dr. Eris Thorne, Laura's estranged brother, had narrowed down the possible locations of the last door to Elias's private study, within the sprawling, decaying Thorne family home. Eris, haunted by his sister's probable fate and fueled by a burgeoning guilt for his past inaction, had finally provided Eleanor with a crucial, albeit cryptic, clue: an old, dusty blueprint of the house, showing a minor discrepancy in the study's wall dimensions, hinting at a hidden space. The night air was thick with the scent of damp earth and impending revelation as Eleanor pulled up to the Thorne estate. The house, usually a dark, silent sentinel, seemed to hum with a latent energy. Eleanor, equipped with her minimal tools, a high-intensity flashlight, a set of lock-picking instruments, and a specialized sonic scanner, bypassed the decrepit front gate, her movements silent, almost ethereal. She entered through a side door Aris had identified as being prone to jamming, a subtle creak her only announcement. The private study was just as Elias left it, an ostentatious display of wealth, leather-bound books, and a grand mahogany desk. But Eleanor wasn't interested in the obvious. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned the walls, her fingers tracing the faint lines of the blueprint. The discrepancy, a mere 6 inches, was almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. She ran her sonic scanner along the designated wall. A subtle change in density, a hollow thrum, confirmed her suspicion. This was it. The last door. She began her meticulous process of gaining access. Her flashlight beam danced across the ornate wallpaper, searching for seams, for subtle shifts in pattern. She found a faint, almost invisible seam in the molding near the antique fireplace. Her fingers, deft and experienced, probed. There, beneath a cleverly disguised decorative rosette, was a tiny, almost hidden button. It was not a conventional lock, but a concealed mechanism, requiring precision and a delicate touch. She pressed it, and with a soft, agonizing sound, an antique lock mechanism within the wall clicked, then whirred. The heavy section of the wall, disguised as a bookshelf, began to shift inward with a slow, grinding groan. The dust motes dancing like phantom particles in the faint light filtering from the hallway. The air that escaped from the newly opened cavity was stale, metallic, and carried the faint, unsettling scent of something long hidden. The heavy door continued to swing inward, revealing a dark, confined space. Eleanor shone her flashlight into the void. For a terrifying second, as the door opened wider, the room appeared empty, a mere cubbyhole. Or worse. She saw something horrific that deepened the mystery: a single, bloodied, high-heeled shoe, gleaming ominously in the beam. Her breath hitched, an empty, crudely constructed cage, its rusted bars glinting, sat in the corner. Despair, cold and sharp, threatened to set in, a chilling premonition that Laura was truly gone forever. Her last hope extinguished, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum in the suffocating silence. But Eleanor Vance was not one to yield to despair. Just as the crushing weight of failure threatened to consume her, her flashlight beam, in a desperate, last-ditch sweep, caught a faint glint on the far wall, almost invisible behind a trailing cobweb. A cleverly concealed, almost invisible, hidden panel, flush with the existing wall. It was a false back, a final layer of Elias's intricate deception, with a surge of renewed determination, a primal need for truth overriding her fear. She jammed her pry bar into the thin seam and forced it open. The panel creaked, then gave way with a splintering sound. What lay beyond was not Laura Thorne, but something even more damning: a meticulously organized, soundproofed room. It was not a dungeon, but a high-tech control center. The air here was cool, sterile, and faintly smelled of ozone. The room was filled with rows of humming servers, blinking lights of recording equipment, and multiple computer screens displaying a vast digital network of illicit transactions, a global money laundering operation beyond Eleanor's darkest imaginings. And then, her gaze fell upon a reinforced fireproof vault tucked into a corner, her hands trembling. She used a portable forensic kit to bypass its biometric lock. Inside, she found not gold or jewels, but a series of encrypted external hard drives and, more importantly, a single, unassuming digital voice recorder. She inserted the device into her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen as she bypassed its encryption. A voice, Laura Thorne's voice, clear and strong, filled the silent room. It was a final, harrowing confession. Laura detailed Elias's manipulative nature, his vast financial crimes, how she had unwittingly become entangled in his web, and the true reason for her disappearance. She wasn't missing. She was kept alive, drugged and held captive in a remote, hidden location, specifically to prevent her from speaking out before Elias could complete his final transfer. The confession ended abruptly, with Laura's voice fading, a chilling timestamp on the recording indicating it had been made just 3 days prior. The truth, in its brutal clarity, was shocking. Laura was not alive. The final transfer had not yet happened, but Elias, fearing discovery, had eliminated her just hours after recording her testimony. The evidence of Elias's crimes and the chilling method of her suppression was laid bare, a horrifying legacy etched in digital sound waves. Eleanor stood frozen, the horror of the revelation washing over her. She had found the truth, but it was a truth steeped in tragedy. Just as Eleanor absorbed this devastating proof, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Captain Sterling, his face grim, burst through the hidden doorway Eleanor had just opened, followed by a tactical unit, their weapons drawn. He had been alerted by a panicked Detective Miller, who, filled with growing unease about Eleanor's isolation and a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong, had secretly tracked Eleanor's comms after Eris Thorne, in a moment of desperate fear for Eleanor's safety, had raised a final, frantic alarm with Miller. Sterling's face, initially stern with skepticism and the threat of disciplinary action for Eleanor's unauthorized solo operation, transformed as his eyes swept over the room. His expression shifted from disbelief to shock, then to utter horror as he saw the rows of servers, the illicit data, and the tablet in Eleanor's hand. Playing Laura's final heartbreaking confession, the tactical unit, initially on high alert for a confrontation, lowered their weapons, their faces mirroring their captain's stunned disbelief. A profound, grudging respect began to bloom in their eyes as they witnessed the overwhelming evidence of Elias's depravity and Eleanor's incredible, almost prophetic, intuition. Through a small, near-concealed security monitor on a wall, Eleanor saw him, Elias Thorne. He had arrived on the scene, perhaps sensing Eleanor's presence or responding to an alert from his system. His confident smirk, always present, crumbled into pure, unadulterated panic as he watched his hidden world, his meticulously constructed empire of lies, utterly exposed. His world collapsed around him, a digital and physical ruin. The game was over. The last door had revealed not only the truth of Laura Thorne's fate, but the depths of a darkness that had almost gone unpunished. Eleanor, though weary, felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Justice, however tragic, was finally within reach. The immediate aftermath of the last door revelation was a controlled chaos. Elias Thorne, his face a mask of abject terror and disbelief, was swiftly apprehended at the scene. The irrefutable evidence, Laura's harrowing digital confession, the meticulously logged illicit transactions on the servers, the sheer scale of the global money laundering operation provided an overwhelming case against him. The final transfer he had so carefully orchestrated never materialized. His digital empire crumbled into dust. He was processed, charged, and within weeks, his carefully constructed world of wealth and influence dissolved. Elias Thorne lost everything: his freedom, his vast hidden wealth, and his carefully constructed reputation. He faced a swift and severe legal punishment: his myriad crimes, including the cruel confinement and eventual murder of Laura, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life paying for his depravity. The justice he had so cunningly evaded for years finally caught up to him, relentless and unforgiving. For Captain Thomas Sterling, the revelations were a profound shock. The sheer brilliance of Eleanor's investigation, her uncanny ability to unearth a truth buried beneath layers of calculated deceit, had shattered his rigid adherence to conventional procedure. He had witnessed firsthand the horrifying evidence of Elias's depravity and the devastating truth of Laura's fate. The public commendation that followed Eleanor's actions was impossible to ignore. A few days after the Thorne estate raid, Captain Sterling summoned Eleanor to his office, the same office where he had so often dismissed her methods. The air was thick with unspoken apologies. "Detective Vance, have a seat," Sterling said, his voice unusually subdued. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk, avoiding her direct gaze. I owe you an apology, a significant one. My skepticism, my obstruction, it was misguided. My adherence to protocol blinded me to what you saw, what you knew. You were right, Vance. Horrifically right. His admission was genuine, laced with a palpable sense of shame. He didn't offer excuses. He offered sincere regret. As a concrete act of support and atonement, Sterling personally ensured that Eleanor received the highest commendation for her tenacity, foresight, and courage. When whispers of disciplinary action for her unauthorized solo operation began to circulate from higher-ups, Sterling, unexpectedly, became her staunchest advocate. He leveraged his decades of experience and influence, shutting down the critics, defending her methods, and highlighting the undeniable results. This was a genuine shift in his perspective, a profound realization of his own misjudgment. He had not only apologized, but had actively worked to clear her name and solidify her standing, becoming an unexpected and powerful ally. The new calm that settled over Eleanor was not one of blissful peace, but of a quiet, profound resolution. The tragic outcome for Laura Thorne, though painful, was tempered by the knowledge that justice had been served, and a dangerous criminal empire dismantled. Within weeks of the case's closure, Eleanor was offered a new, specialized role within the department head of a newly formed complex case analysis unit. This was more than just a promotion. It was an acknowledgement of her unique talents, her intuitive approach to criminal psychology, and her unparalleled ability to decipher the hidden patterns in seemingly unsolvable cases. It was an opportunity to apply her unorthodox methods on a broader scale, to delve into investigations that confounded conventional police work, and, most importantly, to prevent others from falling through the cracks, from becoming invisible victims in the shadows of deceit. It was a chance to truly make a meaningful difference, to bring closure where only despair had existed. A few weeks later, on a rare, clear evening, Eleanor, Detective Miller, and a now reconciled Dr. Eris Thorne. Laura's brother sat in Eleanor's newly organized office. The room, now a testament to her new role, felt different, less cold, more like a nerve center of quiet determination. They discussed the harrowing journey, the intricate layers of deception, and the tragic outcome for Laura. Eris, though still carrying the weight of his sister's loss, found a fragile peace in the truth being exposed. "I should have listened to her sooner," Eris murmured, his voice thick with regret. "She tried to warn me, tried to give me clues, but I was too afraid of Elias, too caught up in my own bitterness." Eleanor reached across the table and placed a hand on his arm, a rare gesture of comfort. "You helped us, Eris. When it mattered most, that's what counts. We brought her story to light. It's incredible." Detective Vance, Miller said, his eyes wide with renewed respect. The way you put it all together. The locket. The digital trails. The door. Nobody else would have seen it. Eleanor gazed at the city lights twinkling outside her window, reflecting on the darkness they had uncovered, the pervasive nature of secrets, and the enduring importance of looking beyond the obvious, even when it was painful. There's always a door. Miller, she said softly. Always a crack in the facade. You just have to be willing to look for it, even when it's uncomfortable. And you have to trust your gut. The conversation flowed, a cathartic release of shared experience. Miller, having witnessed her methods firsthand, expressed his renewed faith in justice and the human capacity for resilience, even in the face of such profound evil. He saw now that justice wasn't just about arrests and convictions. It was about understanding, about bearing witness to the truth. For Eleanor, the new calm was a foundation, not an endpoint. It was the quiet strength that came from knowing she had faced the darkness, navigated its depths, and emerged with the truth, ready to face the next hidden door, the next untold story. 2 years later, the once isolated rhythm of Eleanor Vance's life had subtly shifted, expanding to embrace a new, fulfilling purpose. She was no longer just Detective Vance. She was a respected and highly sought-after figure in law enforcement, her name synonymous with groundbreaking investigative techniques and unwavering dedication. The complex case analysis unit she spearheaded had become a beacon within the department, a testament to her unique blend of intuitive psychological insight and meticulous forensic skill. Cases that had baffled others for years, cold trails that had grown colder with each passing season, now found their resolution under her discerning eye. Her reputation preceded her, not just for solving cases, but for her empathy and unwavering commitment to victims. She had a rare ability to humanize the statistics, to see beyond the files and connect with the profound loss and lingering questions that plagued the families of missing persons. Her personal life, though still private and valuing quiet contemplation, was less isolated. The haunted shadows that had once clung to her eyes had receded, replaced by a deep-seated sense of peace. The unresolved case from her past, the one that had mirrored Laura Thorne's disappearance, had, through the lessons learned, finally found a quiet closure. Eleanor had used her newfound expertise, her understanding of Elias Thorne's manipulative psyche, to meticulously re-examine the old file, finding the forgotten last door within its dusty pages, ultimately bringing long-awaited answers to a family that had almost given up hope. She looked healthier, less burdened, a testament to her personal and professional growth. Eleanor dedicated a significant portion of her time to paying it forward. She understood the profound impact a single, guiding hand could have on a budding talent. She personally mentored a new generation of promising detectives, particularly those who displayed an aptitude for unconventional thinking or a deep empathy for victims. Her lectures and workshops, conducted in quiet, focused sessions, emphasized the critical importance of intuition, interdisciplinary investigation, weaving together psychology, digital forensics, and social pattern recognition, and above all, the human element of every case. She taught them to look beyond the obvious, to listen to the whispers, and to trust their gut feelings, even when the evidence seemed to contradict them. Beyond the precinct, Eleanor worked closely with victim advocacy groups, lending her voice and expertise to ensure that the families of missing persons received comprehensive psychological and legal support. She believed that even when the outcome was tragic, understanding was a form of healing. She often spoke at national conferences, pushing for policy changes that would allocate more resources to cold cases and implement mandatory psychological profiling training for new recruits. She helped establish a national initiative for missing persons, creating a centralized database for information sharing and a network of specialized investigative units across the country, using her hard-won expertise to change systemic shortcomings. Her work became her legacy, a testament to her unwavering belief that every life, every story, deserved to be found and acknowledged. The story ends on a late autumn afternoon, in Eleanor's office. The room, once a fortress of solitude, now felt filled with a gentle ambient light. The corkboard, once dominated by the obscured photograph, now displayed commendations, maps of solved cases, and a small, vibrant drawing of a sunflower sent by a child whose parent she had helped find. Eleanor was not looking at the triumphs, however. She was looking at a new, complex cold case file, one that had stumped multiple departments for years. Its cover was thick with decades of dust, its contents a tangled web of contradictory statements and dead ends. The sun streamed through her window, casting long, golden shafts of light across the desk, illuminating the file. For the first time, clearly visible on her left wrist, was the faint, symbolic scar from an old case, a jagged line from a piece of shattered glass during a difficult arrest early in her career. It no longer signified pain or vulnerability, but resilience, wisdom, and the marks of a life lived on the front lines of justice. Her expression was one of calm determination, not haunted doubt, as she closed the file for the day, a subtle yet confident gesture. The case would wait until tomorrow. Eleanor Vance, a beacon of hope in the relentless fight for truth, was ready for the next challenge, ready to open the next hidden door. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.